So, here we are back again. Now we begin our second book. Sorry, a little cheat. We begin our second book of Greyhawk Adventure series and our second. Better. And our second book of Guard the Rogue series. Artifact of Evil. Yep, that's the title. Then it have also 33 chapters. Then I have to remember that because I forgot for the previous one. And it have also an epilogue, so it's 34 in all, I think. Then today we read 2 chapters, then we continue Monday, and so on. Okay? Good, let's start. Chapter 1. Well, the book have 90 pages off, so anyway. Chapter 1. Horns bellowed in answer to the screaming trumpets that sounded from the high towers of the concentric castle. The starless night was suddenly bright with globes of glowing light, radiance that shed betraying illumination behind the lines of besiegers outside the fortress. Men and machines were moving across the trampled ground toward the great stone walls. Arrows, quarrels, and streaking missiles of magical origin flew toward the encircling soldiers. Some arrows and quarrels lodged in wooden mantlets or struck into shields, but others sank into flesh. The magic missiles, blazing firebolts, and crackling bolts of lightning were far worse. Bodies were tossed high by a roaring blast. Wheeled shelters were split and broken by the flashing strokes of electricity, while metal-clad men-at-arms behind them became charred corpses. Varicolored darts sped unerringly into helpless targets who screamed and died. Turrets of flame erupted from the sky to set siege towers blazing, giant torches that added a hellish light to the scene, while the raging fire swept over the advancing lines or made curtains of flame that seared their flesh. From this conflagration sprang huge man-like forms. The very flames formed them, and these great things strode forth from the fires to further wreak death and destruction on the attacking army. Glowing tentacles sprouted up from the earth itself and wrapped their fiery coils around war machines and men. Flesh and blood could not stand such an inferno. The lines of soldiers quickly became scattered, fleeing men seeking escape from flaming death. Their ranks decimated, all cohesion gone, arrows and buzzing crossbow bolts soaked out the retreating attackers and exacted further toll, while chains of blazing blue lightning leaped among them, slaying and completing the devastation. Oh well, there. Okay, good. The battle was not all one-sided, of course. While the defenders in the great castle wrought their destruction, the ringing soldier had countered with shower of arrows, but parapet and merlon protected the defenders, and bolt and shaft most often splintered harmlessly against stone. Rocks and boulders smashed into bartizan and tower, impacted wall or arched over into the courtyard, before fire silenced catapult and trebuchet. Thick spear-like missiles flew also until likewise burned the ballistae that shot them forth were blazing bonfires. There were few pitiful spells cast too, silvery darts and opalescent rays of cold light, even a few blasts of fire, but this had a slight effect. It seemed that the spellcasters of the besieging force were unable to withstand those within the great fortress, for the former had to work relatively unprotected, while those within were not so exposed. Abruptly the scene changed. Almost simultaneously the bright spheres of light that revealed the attacking army went out. In turn the sky above the castle was bright, and the place was illuminated with something that resembled the light from a full moon, while the area round about its wall was dark, save for burning equipment and fiery elementals still delivering death. As all this occurred, drenching bursts of rain issued forth from directly above the huge fire elementals, while gentler precipitation fell upon burning wood. The fire elementals, 4 in number, hissed and roared their anger and pain as the pelting drops of water vaporized upon them, sending forth steaming clouds and cooling the monster's flames. One of these glowing elementals was near the partially filled moat. A pillar of water suddenly arose, formed itself, and grappled with its fiery counterpart. Even as the two giant elementals struggled, a new sort of elemental creatures arose from the rain-soaked earth. This one formed of damp dirt and stone and clay. Earth and fire contested, as did fire and water. Men watching from the castle or the surrounding camp of the besieger saw the blazing fire elemental's flames become smothered and wink out. Bass twangs and thumps came from the encircling forts, and arching boulders and massive spears again rained upon the curtain walls, the towers, and the castle courtyard and building inside it. The radiance illuminating the fortress was extinguished, but almost immediately replaced by globes of light, such as those that lit the scenes behind the attacking forces. Some hung above the place, others seemed to emanate from turret top, bartizan, and tower. The contesting spellcasters seemed to be playing a game, for globes of utter darkness would intermingle with the bright spheres and neutralize each other, while yet fresh lights would spring up elsewhere. As this all occurred, the defenders on wall and tower were plain to see, and sniping fire from longbow and the heavy crossbow began to score successes. Here and there, men dropped after suddenly sprouting a cloth-yard shaft or the feathers of a thumb-thick crossbow bolt. The rumbling and murmur of advancing troops were again discernible to the castle's defenders. Despite the terrible punishment dealt their initial foray, the troops were again advancing to storm the walls. Somehow the soldiers had been rallied, reinforced, and sent back. Trumpet and drum sounded within the fortress, calling every possible defender to man the walls for a last defensive effort. Their magic users and clerics had spent their powers on the destruction of the first attack. The fresh assault would have to rely on flesh and blood, armor and weapon to hurl the attackers back from the stronghold. The castle's own smaller versions of the attackers' war machines were put into play. Springall and catapult began working while rocks were radiated cauldrons of burning charcoal and bubbling oil swung out over machicolated battlements, and ram catchers assembled. A column assembled in the outer bailey. The great gates of the fortress were opened, the iron portcullis winched up, and the oaken drawbridge let drop with a clatter and a bang. Out into the pale morning came a swarm of hulking mailed ogres brandishing huge morning stars, 6-foot swords, and other massive weapons. With them were even more malign creatures, a score or more of hideous trolls, monsters needing no weapon save their iron-hard talons and teeth. Their stopped, shambling gait made the trolls seem smaller than the thicker ogres, but occasionally one would stiffen and stand upright to peer ahead. Then their height, more than half again a man's size, and the full head taller than their ugly companions, could be seen. Huge trolls and red ogres, nearly 100 in total, issued forth, crossed the oak of the drawbridge, and fanned out. These were the terrible advance guard of the castle Sally. More trumpets blared, and behind the advance guard came a force of gnolls, hyena-faced things 7 feet tall and armored as men would be. Their great bows taut, bardishes and glaives ready, they came in hundreds, barking and giggling as they advanced, lusting for the feast of battle and flesh to come. If the castle was besieged, it by no means felt itself at the mercy of the army doing so. "At last, the filth from below is vomited forth," thus spoke the general commanding the ringing host. As he said this, he waved his arm in a signal, and the echoing rumble of kettle drums filled the morning. Bristling phalanxes of pikemen supported by male cavalry moved to meet the ogres and gnolls, while archers and crossbowmen began to direct a flaming volley of burning missiles toward the knots of rampaging trolls. The field before the castle gate was quickly swirled with men and humanoids locked in mortal combat. Champions and spellcasters of the attacking army were now engaging the trolls, immune as they were to most harm that ordinary folk could cause. These contests were terrible things indeed, and many men fell before the onrushing green monsters. This pleased the crimson-robed priestess, who observed the melee from the castle's highest tower. The bright light of the sun climbing higher into the heavens, however, also revealed a curious fact to these observers. Where ranks of charred corpses and slain bodies should have been, the commanders of the fortress saw only slight evidence of the slaughter which had been wrought by spells and elementals before daylight. Instead of soldiers slain in windrows and devastated by firestorms, there were but scores of dead, not hundreds or thousands. This is wrong. We are at the ruins of the siege towers and war machines. Where are the ruins of the siege towers and war machines? Demanded one of the greater of their number. Priestess Wo's vestments were trimmed in fiery orange or tawny shades, as opposed to the bright gold work on the speaker's gown. They would make no answer, but one in deep red and bright crimson replied, "Where indeed?" and turning to the huddle of his lacers, commanded one of their number haughtily. "Go," he ordered, "request that the others hasten here with all speed." One of the clerics carried off, while the remainder of the group again turned their scrutiny to the fighting below. The first charge had pushed the attacking forces backward in a great blow, but their lines of armored men and horses had not broken. Now it was the turn of the sailing humanoids and monsters to be forced away, back toward the castle's barbican and massive gatehouse. The four companies of Yanalite gnolls were now hard pressed by infantry, while the skirmishing crossbowmen sent humming quarrels into the humanoids' bands. Flanks. The ogres too were being slowly decimated. The survivors shoved back by pike and polearm, the towering creatures subject to well-aimed shafts and bolts from rear-rank fighters. True, both gnolls and ogres had exacted a great price upon the attacking soldiers, but the observers in the castle could see it was a mere pinprick compared to the total force that ringed the beleaguered stronghold. Of the three sorts of creatures that formed the counter-attacking force, the 20 or so trolls were fewest in number and most effective in their devastation. 10 times their number had fallen to them before the first troll went down under burning arrows and hacking blades. Its sundered pieces attempted to rejoin themselves even as the loathsome monster began regenerating its own wounded and scorched flesh. A squad of sappers came suddenly to the area where its straws marked the situation, carrying with them pots of smoldering coals. Soon smoke and flame came from their efforts, and the greasy black plumes marked the final hand of one after another of these oil-soaked, dismembered limbs. Others of the trolls went to quicker deaths, struck by lesser magic users, mere evokers, and conjurers, but armed with slim wands that spat missiles of magical sort, and flame as well. It was evident that they had been saved for just such a purpose, and they now went about their duties with efficient action, shielded by fighting men and even clerics in brown or green garments. The surviving humanoids fell back first, their retreat toward the castle quickly becoming a panicked rout as the men pressed them. With them went the ogres, now interested only in saving themselves from a sharp pike and broad-headed arrow. The drawbridge was hauled rapidly up, however, they shut fast the gate. And gnolls and ogres alike had no recourse but to turn and fight to the death, having been abandoned to their fate by the heartless commanders of the castle. The trolls, too stupid to fear the inevitable, also fought until burned to vile ashes or reduced to a welter of stinking jelly by showers of acid that caused their crawling flesh to smolder and run. The last of these transpired under the gates of the crimson-clad watchers, augmented now by another handful of men. "We must get relief soon, or the castle falls," said the leader of these clerics. "Where is Horval Crookfinger?" A tall, thin man clad in a robe of purple so dark that only the brilliance of the sun revealed its true shade stepped forward at the summons and bowed, his hand held over the embroidered red trigon on his chest. "Your command, elder brother?" the man asked meekly. "You fools were duped by mere phantasms, false visions. roared the commander. "The entire humor of our assembled spellcasters was spent on the destruction of illusions. Why did no one call me forth?" The magic user standing before the enraged commander of the castle's garrison made no answer, nor did any of the others. Who dared remind the speaker that he himself had commanded absolute privacy? None among the assemblage would brave him when he was lost in poppy juice and lotus smoke. "Fools!" he repeated, and then took another long look at the tableau beneath. The last of the trolls was a writhing bonfire. The gnolls and ogres were trampled and dead, and the attackers were storming the gate's outworks, ladders against Barbican. "Go, Crookfinger! Use crying to alert those hordes that they must leave off bickering with the Hojebly. Both must march to our succor at once." "I dare not use crystal or fluid, elder brother," the purple-robed man replied fearfully. "I have tried already, and enemy spellbenders nearly had my mind." "So, another useless tool." The commander eyed the magic user with a malignant stare, and the fellow seemed to shrivel before his gaze. "I can go to the heroes' tribes, elder brother, and force them to come at once," Horval Crookfinger suggested. The evil countenance of the one referred to as elder brother twisted into a large smile. "Yes, you can go. Tell our cousins and uncles with the tribes that they are to move with all speed to relieve this castle, for its loss opens the way to all the Pomarj. Then you will carry my report to the oldest. Understand?" "Of course, elder brother." "Then come with me to my chambers. I will write a message to accompany the rest." With that, the red and gold-clad man strode to the staircase that descended inside the massive keep tower. The magic user followed. "Oh, well, that's a new thing. Okay, good. I cancel that, you know." Grazie, Beer. Non mi appare qui però. "Then come with me to my chambers. I will write a message to accompany the rest." With that, the red and gold-clad man strode to the staircase that descended inside the massive keep tower. The magic user followed. Devo seriamente risolvere un problema di spam in tutto questo. Within minutes, the pair were back atop the ice structure. Their associates had remained there, observing the assault, as the commander and the spellcasting underling arrived. A major escalade was being attempted on the southern bastion, but observed for a moment. Bye. Sorry for the waiting, I have spam issues. "The fools have left off their attack upon the gate to gain the walled bastion there. This is heartening." Oh god. A lot of spam today. Well, I continue to ban all of one. And another one. Good. I need a mod. I begin again, sorry. "The fools have left off their attack upon the gate to gain the walled bastion there. This is heartening. Watch, Crookfinger, so you can tell this when you report," the red-robed commander ordered. Then, turning to the knot of others who stood anxiously by, he sent 3 of their number, lesser clerics of some sort, to bolster the defense of the wall. Soon the man on top of the towering keep saw these 3, with a platoon of men-at-arms, hurrying across the inner bailey's confines into the outer yard. Then they struggled a bit, as they climbed the corrosive swale that sloped up to the curving strong point on the outer wall. The bastion was a 20-foot-high wall topped by a crenellated battlement. The wall was plied at the bottom, serving as a batter to foil a ram, pick or screw, and to confound attackers in tower or otherwise. For half of its height, the bastion's curve was backed by a packed earth. Along this ground that men ached, and at intervals of about 6 feet, the thick wall was pierced with sloping embrasures, so that archer or crossbowman could lose his missiles at attacking men with almost total safety. From pierced merlon and embrasures between, as well as from the projecting parapet, the machicolation, missiles, and rocks could be rained upon attackers. Defenders doing just that swarmed along the walkway atop the wall, which was as wide as a man is tall. The escalade was simply an affair of mantlets, ladders, and rushing soldiers trying to protect themselves with shields as they rushed forward. One of the red-robed figures atop the tower waved his arms, and the small onager thrummed and bucked, its boulder sailing high over the bastion to fall somewhere on the other side. A splintering crash and screams indicated that it had scored a hit, and the commander smiled evilly. The tops of ladders appeared, but the platoon of fresh troops just arrived were armed with military forks. They spread themselves along the curve of the wall and began tipping over ladders by pushing them away. Some of the mail-clad attackers did manage to clamber atop the battlement, but missiles or sword cut down most of them. Few indeed got to the catwalk and began milling with the defenders there. Abruptly, one of the turrets along the bastion wall collapsed with a crash. Shouts indicated that some enemy had used magic to cause this. The commander was not worried. Both sides had spent most of their spells before dawn, and before another magical assault could strike, his own spellcasters would also be renewed in power. "Enough!" bellowed the commander, turning toward the magic user in his purple-black robe, as if to apprise him once again before allowing him to go on so important a mission. "Alert the captains to bring their humanoid scum here immediately, then report to the oldest, who will give you instruction thereafter." Orval Crookfinger bowed deeply, muttered and gestured for a moment, and suddenly was a great rook whose plumage had a purplish sheen, and upon whose breast was a single scarlet feather. "As you command, Elder," the bear croaked. Then with a clumsy flapping, the raven took wing, and flew in an upward spiral. The speck intermingled with 100 others like it circling in the sky, carrion eaters hopeful of feasting soon. Again the commander smiled evilly, for he appreciated the transformation, the clever speech as a bird, and the precaution of becoming one with a wheeling flock before flying to fulfill orders. The elder brother stood looking at the dark specks. Then, just as one soared southward and went out of sight high into the blue heavens, a commotion from below broke his reverie. "Find out what is going on, quickly!" he shouted to the group with him. All 8 of the remaining men hastened to obey, leaving their master alone. The brazen clangor continued from below. Some dolt was hammering on the great alarm gong at the entrance to the massive keep building. Had some men-at-arms gone mad? There were certainly no enemies within the castle, yet. To reassure himself of this fact, the commander walked to the tower's battlement, stepped between 2 merlons, and peered downward. Soldiers in bloody hues, some bearing shields likewise flashing red, were converging on the low twin towers that marked the entrance to the keep. They are all only answering the alarm, the commander of the fortress thought to himself. But he hastened to go below himself to learn exactly what was occurring. The staircase encircled the inside of the outer wall of the upthrust tower that was the core of the castle's inner works. the one known only as elder brother, sped down these steps, passing the upper floors without pause. Shouts, yells, and the clash of steel on steel urged him onward with even greater haste. Something was certainly amiss, he thought to himself. Had one of thy mercenary contingents rioted? Impossible, under the conditions. Internal revolt was always possible too, but no ambitious member of the order with sufficient power and backing was within the stronghold. Besides, the assault precluded such an attempted coup at this time. He would keep an eye on Leicester, though, now that he considered the ambition that existed in others. What remained? Some humor to madden the guards? Impossible here. Somehow the enemy must have broken in, and then it came to him, the Desertin Dungeon. He had sent its inhabitants out in the abortive counterstroke. That was no loss save that they had failed to slay sufficient numbers of the foe, and possibly had allowed the enemy entrance to the complex underground places beneath the castle. Those stupid, prowling, snarling humanoids and their troll fellows were troublesome, and he had been willing enough to see their slaughter, but at what price? "To me!" the gold and crimson-robed commander yelled as he sped across the great hall. A handful of crossbowmen, weapons ready, were entering the echoing hall from its opposite side, where an archway led to the servant quarters and the kitchen complex. The mailed men-at-arms halted, raised their crossbows, and loosed a half-dozen quarrels at him. End of chapter 1, with a cut scene. So, I don't know what time is it, but I think, well, it's pretty late. I don't know if I continue or not. Maybe not. Maybe I stop there, one chapter in one, because it's a bit late and I want to do other things. And in this way, there is only 33 chapters in the book, so I read 3 chapters every day, and that is the best way. So, this is the first chapter of Artifact of Evil, and we end here with this introductory chapter of the invasion of the humanoids of the Pomarj, an event in Greyhawk very famous. And after that, we see next time how the things continue. For today is all. I give you a good evening, good dinner, good night, good everything as always, and bye!